Welcome to another edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up. During this program, we will highlight the agenda items presented to the Lakeville City Council at their September 8th, 2015 meeting. First highlighted item on the agenda is item number 5B, Fire Department Quarterly Report. And to provide the background information on this agenda item is Fire Chief Mike Meyer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. I'd like to present the Lakeville Fire Department second quarter report, and I'll start with our mission statement. Lakeville Fire Department is dedicated to serving the community through the protection of lives, property by providing public safety education and a professional emergency response. Fire inspections that we did in the second quarter, we had 121 commercial inspections completed, 3 new daycare inspections, and 8 burn permits issued. Again, when we go out in the community, do our inspections, it's an opportunity for us to educate the businesses and the community on why we're out doing inspections and the reasons behind them. Fire prevention visits, we had 19 station tours and the ECFE annual picnic. And one thing that we added new for fire prevention that we did this year was we went to Century Middle School and taught over 300 of the students fire extinguisher training. We're trying to engage the schools as far as when they have their FACS or their home economics classes and talk about kitchen safety and such with them. We held our 5th annual blood drive on May 2nd, where we had firefighters volunteered 35 hours, where we collected 55 units of blood, slightly down from last year. May 13th, we participated at Lakeville South with the mock crash with the Lakeville Police Department, Alina, and North Air Care. This is always a great message to get out there to the students during the prom time and into the school season. Out in the community, one thing we did this summer is we participated with Parkview Elementary in a book reading program that they had on Tuesday, every Tuesday of the month. And then we also, on the far left, the Fields of Fire, we were out at the, with the Public Safety Foundation doing the Fields of Fire, which is a fundraiser for them. So we had a number of firefighters there that participated in that. Incidents in the second quarter. From the pictures, you can see we had a few that were pretty decent. I'll just highlight the bottom center one that you can see from the aerial view above. That was a mutual aid call to Farmington actually became 2 structure fires. From the one that you see there and then the house to the left that's out of the picture that caught fire from the initial fire. Total fire calls for the second quarter, you can see we were pretty even compared to the previous 2 years with 213 calls. Looking year to date, we're still pretty even compared to the previous years with 427 calls. And then from a monthly standpoint, you can see June has become one of our busier months, and I can say that July outpaced June as far as calls that we've seen so far this year. Breakdown of call types, major calls that we responded to, false alarms, good intent calls, hazardous conditions, and fires and vehicle accidents were in those top categories. And a new slide I added was just time of day call to give you a comparison of what we see for time of day. And our daytime response is Monday 6 a.m. Until 6 p.m. and that repeats obviously every day. The nighttime calls are 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. Weekends end or start Friday night and go until Monday morning. You can see the majority of our calls are during the daytime, weekday, and this is an average amongst all 4 stations. That completes my second quarter report. I thank you for your dedication and support to the Lakeville Fire Department, and I'll stand for any questions.
Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 5C, Public Works Monthly Report. And to give the background information on this agenda item is Public Works Director Chris Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is our August 2015 monthly report for the Public Works Department, and I'll start with some project updates. First off, our water treatment facility improvements, the concrete work on our reservoir expansion, which is the biggest portion of the project, is now complete. You can see them stripping forms off of all the concrete work, and that's nearly complete. The next step will be to fill that reservoir with water and more or less test it for the integrity of the new reservoir and make sure it's watertight and that we're good to proceed to physically connecting it with the existing reservoirs. Again, as council is aware, but just a reminder to everyone, our current capacity is 3.1 million gallons. This is an additional 1 million gallons that will be added to the facility. Also, along with that work, there's other work that's taking place inside the facility that includes some additional high service pumps, some additional chemical feed equipment, and some other minor modifications. Again, this work is scheduled to be completed by January of 2016 so that the plant is entirely online for next season. Street reconstruction, of course, you can see a lot of paving work, restoration work, even pipe work in the photos in front of you. Work continues on the project. In fact, in one phase of the project, we were putting down the final pavement actually today. Things are progressing very well. We're on schedule to where we wanted to be at this point in the year, leading into next year where we take on phase 2 of the project. So all in all, things are going well. Again, we expect that all the restoration work will be completed here in the next 30 to 60 days prior to the winter season. The 5060 Roundabout, as the council is very well aware, the roundabout did open on Friday, August 28th, a little after 5 p.m. Just wanted to remind everyone that this is still an active work zone. While the roadway is open, there is still work that needs to be completed, as is apparent if you drive through there. There is still some sidewalk and trail work as well as restoration work that is still underway and will be throughout the remainder of the fall until we expect it to be substantially completed. Our Holyoke Avenue water tower, if you've driven by there, you've seen some progress, and you can kind of see that in the photos in front of you. The contractor shaft crew that erects the shaft of the tower came on site in August after the foundation was completed, and they have completed 4 concrete pours to date. They are scheduled to continue pouring 2 to 3 times a week, weather permitting, and expect to have the shaft constructed by early November. In total, there will be 12 shaft pours and 16 dome panels. So more or less what occurs is the shaft is constructed in 12 pours. They pour these dome panels on the ground, which are 16 of them. They place those on the top of the shaft when it's done. And then after that, the crew comes in, a different crew comes in and starts erecting the actual bowl of the tower that holds the water. That's erected on the ground and then lifted into place on top of those dome panels, and that'll be done sometime next year. It's anticipated that the tower will be online by next fall, or the fall of 2016. Well, 2020, as we continue to talk about our water infrastructure, that's progressing along. The drilling of the well to about 550 feet has been completed, and now the contractor is working on development of the well. So what they do is they actually develop the well area, or the cavern where the water collects, at about 500 and plus feet below the ground. With that, if you drive by, this is in Cherry View Park, you'll see a lot of really fine white sand. That's the formation that they're developing, and then they bring the sand out of the well. Along with that, what you see in the photos here, a little over a week ago, the well collection pipe was connected to where the future well will be, and that's the photos you see there. What actually occurred was that pipe was directionally drilled from Dodd Boulevard to where the well site is in Cherry View Park to limit the disruptions within the Cherry View Park area. It actually went under a number of trees as well as the hockey rink without having to remove or disturb any of that. So actually, if you didn't drive by for a couple of days, you wouldn't have ever known that it even went in, because it was pretty minimal disruptions to that area. This is expected to be completed by later this year and operational. After some testing, probably next spring, it'll be fully operational for next year's peak water use. Kensington Boulevard, another project. Lane shifts have been completed as paving of the northbound lanes has been completed here a little over a week ago. Now the efforts are focused on the southbound lanes on Kensington. The project's on schedule, of course, with the Labor Day holiday. It sat a little bit for a while there, but the crews are back out there, and it's expected to be completed in the latter part of September. Our miscellaneous road repairs, there was a lot going on. If you went through the Ipava and 175th intersection, that was part of those miscellaneous repairs that was closed for milling and wear course paving last week for 2 days. and striping, but as you can see, if you go through there, all of that has now been completed. That was very difficult based on the timing, based on the opening of the roundabout, and then, of course, the start of school today, but we were able to get it completed with hopefully minimal disruptions, with the exceptions of those 2 days that the roadway was closed. Also, what you see in these photos is some of the parking lot work that's occurred at some of our city facilities, not only here at City Hall, but across the street at Fire Station Number 1, as well as the rear lot of the Heritage Center. Work is underway. Those lots across the street at Heritage Center and the fire station have been paved. The paving will occur here at City Hall in our southerly and westerly parking lots tomorrow, and then by the end of the week, work will shift to our northerly parking lot. Also, Fire Station 2 is another parking lot that will be reconstructed this year. That work's been started and expected to be completed by mid to late September, along with the lot here at City Hall. Some general maintenance slides here. Gravel road maintenance. We do get out and maintain the gravel roads as frequently as possible. The main focus is after a rain event is the best time while there's moisture in the gravel roadway to get out there and maintain it. We still have about 9, almost 10 miles of gravel roads. As part of that maintenance, you can see how the operator's shaping the road to try and put a crown back in the road so that the water can drain off and redistribute the aggregate materials to keep it from going all in the shoulder in the ditch. I haven't done this yet this summer, so I wanted to provide a brief update on our environmental resources to date, or I shouldn't say to date, actually in just July and August, over 245 erosion control inspections were conducted on developments, individual lots, and commercial sites. That's consistent with what we're required to do through our MPCA MS4 permit, as well as our stormwater pollution prevention plan. Also, another occurrence due to some discharges on a significant rain event earlier this summer into Lake Marion. We did actually have to hold building inspections on one development until the adequate erosion control measures could be put back into place. That was the first action like that we had to take actually this year. Also, you'll see in the slide on the right, lower right-hand corner of your screen, we also had an opportunity for education and outreach as it related to our environmental resources at the National Night Out kickoff party that was at the Heritage Center, and we were fortunate enough to put that display together and had about 175 folks that participated come through and participate. We had some games for the kids to play and other things. And lastly, just we highlighted this quick fixes. Well, it's not a lot. That particular section of curb was completely damaged and was actually holding water. So until we can do a more permanent curb repair in about 2 years, when we do some work on Ipava, our crews were out there, and as you can see, and we do this around the community, we'll get out there and do miscellaneous patching and repairs to curbs throughout the community. So just wanted to highlight that's just another things along with the roadway patching and pothole patching we do that we're out, especially at this time of the year prior to the winter season. That does conclude the monthly report for August 2015. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 7. Consider an interim use permit to allow the keeping of raptors for the purpose of falconry. And to provide the background information on this agenda item is City Planner Darrell Morey.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I have to admit this has been a very interesting process and a very interesting request. As I mentioned at the Planning Commission meeting, this is the first time in my 27 years working for the City of Lakeville that we've had a request like this. As you heard from Mr. Schrader, it kind of came about a little bit in a roundabout way, in that he was into City Hall to talk about an accessory building, and it was determined through those conversations what the accessory building purpose was for. And staff, when we reviewed our initial review of the ordinance, because raptors, specifically red-tailed hawks, are not listed as a permitted animal in the animal section of the zoning ordinance, which is chapter 35, we determined that it wasn't allowed. We did some further review, and there is a provision of that section of the zoning ordinance that does allow other birds not listed as either household pets or farm animals by interim use permit. I would like to point out that the criteria in the animal section of the zoning ordinance does not list any specific performance standards related to the allowance by interim use permit. So by default, it refers back then to Chapter 5 of the ordinance, which specifically relates to interim use permits. And if you review that chapter, that reviews you further back to the conditional use permit section, which does have specific performance standards. And if you review those, they're generally related more towards commercial or industrial types of uses and not a single family use of this nature. And also to the conditional use permit criteria for, or findings of fact, for review of the request. And as you can see, you have findings before you this evening. And the focus for staff was on the criteria that pertains to compatibility with surrounding uses. Now, the location, and I have it on the overhead here, is in the Choke Cherry Hill subdivision. Obviously, this aerial photo is a bit dated. There are homes that are going up under construction in Choke Cherry Hill neighborhood. For those at home, it's located east of Dodd Boulevard and south of 185th Street. Mr. Schrader's house is coming along quite nicely, the construction, and I'm sure they're anxious to move in. So the proposal would be to keep the one initial red-tailed hawk at this location with the possibility to add a second at some point in time. Again, going back to the fact that this was a very unique request that staff had not dealt with before, we contacted other cities in the South Metro area to see what their ordinances were related to the keeping of raptors. We specifically contacted Apple Valley, Burnsville, Eagan, Farmington, Rosemount, Hastings, and Savage. And with the exception of Farmington, who, interestingly enough, has basically the same ordinance language that we do, none of the other cities would allow this type of use. I do want to point out that Mr. Schrader has a falconry license, and that's issued by the state DNR. And he, as part of his license, and he was modest, he didn't go through the painstaking detail that it takes to get such a license, and that was brought up and discussed at the Planning Commission meeting. So for those of you who watched that meeting, you probably learned a little bit about that. Certainly staff learned a bit about that as well in talking to Mr. Schrader over the course of the last few weeks. As indicated, he wants to construct an accessory building. That's regulated by the accessory buildings chapter of the ordinance and is not necessarily specifically related to this interim use permit request. The red-tailed hawk will be trained on the property, but there will be no hunting allowed on the property. So we move forward with this request, the interim use permit request, at a public hearing at the Planning Commission on August 20th. Mr. Schrader brought with him a gentleman named Mr. Taylor, who is sitting to his right, who brought a red-tailed hawk and provided probably one of the most interesting, certainly, presentations in my time here at the city for the Planning Commission, and to actually see the bird firsthand and up close. And I know I speak for the Planning Commission too, we learned a lot that night from this gentleman. He's an expert. He's been doing it for over 40 years. And so certainly dispelled any myths or misunderstandings about, first of all, the animal, and second of all, the falconry in general. And as Mr. Schrader had indicated, he provided the details for his specific site. Now you'll see the Planning Commission did recommend approval on a 4-3 vote. It's pretty unusual to get a split vote from the Planning Commission. And Just to clarify so that the City Council understands, the Planning Commission members who voted no did not vote no because they were opposed to the use. They actually supported the use. What their trouble came with is in terms of the ordinance language and the fact that there's no specific performance standards related to this interim use permit request, first of all, and that maybe the interim use permit is not the proper tool or mechanism for allowing this type of use. So 3 members felt that because of that, they voted no. However, the Planning Commission, again, on a 4-3 majority vote, did vote in support to recommend approval of the request, but did direct staff to bring this back to a work session this winter when the Planning Commission does their annual review of zoning ordinance, and if there's areas that need clarification or updates or amendments, city staff, planning department staff keeps track of those year-round. I know Councilmember Swecker and Councilmember Davis have been part of this process, so you're well aware of this process that happens annually. We usually start off with a work session. We kind of roll up our sleeves and talk about these types of items. So this is on the list, and we will have that conversation with the Planning Commission this fall, and there may be a recommendation that would be coming forward to the City Council on that, as well as other aspects of the zoning ordinance. So in summary, long presentation, but I felt given the unique nature of this request and the fact that it's nothing to squawk about, that the presentation was warranted. So staff is recommending approval. There are 6 conditions of the interim use permit that we're recommending, including, again, that there be no more than 2 raptors on the site, that no hunting be allowed from the property, and that the applicant maintain his DNR license. We also recommend the council adopt the findings of fact, and I can stand for any questions.
Item number 7 was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Well, those were the highlighted items presented to the council at their September 8th, 2015 meeting. If you have any questions or comments regarding these agenda items, please feel free to call City Hall. The number is 952-985-4400. Thanks for watching this edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up.